Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin of CollectingJapanesePrints.com. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday we get together and discuss Japanese prints, paintings, history, and culture. Today's Woodblock Wednesday is dedicated to the work of Kiyochika. He's a Meiji period artist, and I think he has yet to receive his with the proper attention. There have been books and certainly exhibitions dedicated to him, but for some reason in the print collecting sort of community, the Meiji period has sort of been one of those periods that everyone overlooks. And so we have collectors that focus either on 20th century Shinhanga or Sosakuhanga or Edo period prints. But the Meiji period is a very important period for Japan's history, its culture, and certainly its art. And I pulled a print of Kiyochika's that I think is actually really wonderful to discuss his work. It sort of encompasses a lot of the quality of his work. And it also showcases sort of the themes that artists were sort of working on during the Meiji period. Without further ado, let's have a look at the print and discuss. So what I have here on the table, and I'll talk about the books. As fans of the channel or the program know, I always like to show reference books that relate to the artists and the prints that we discuss. But today we're discussing one print, and it's actually a significant one. And again, the artist's name is Kiyochika, Kobayashi Kiyochika, and this print is called Three Geisha in One. It was done in 1878, and it's a woodblock print. And when you look at it, at first blush, it kind of looks like a woodblock print, but it also doesn't. It also looks like an etching or even a photograph, and that is completely by design. Kiyochika was, as I said, a product of Meiji period Japan, and at this time, there was all these wonderful new technologies coming into the country. So they were, certainly they had copper etching for hundreds of years. However, they were using mass production techniques. So, for example, in newspapers, during Edo period times, they would use woodblock prints to reproduce images. But about the time of the Meiji period, woodblock prints were actually in decline. And one of the reasons was that it wasn't the main choice for publishers of newspapers and other ephemera. They were using offset lithography, they were using copper etching, and they were using photography, which was relatively new. It was brought into Japan before the Meiji period, but really it got a hold during the Meiji period, and they were using photos in production of, again, newspapers and other things. And so in this particular print, Kiyochika is sort of experimenting with realism, Western realism, which was a big thing. Many artists of the Meiji period studied Western painting, which was really heavily focused on realism. And that really translated into all sort of areas of art for Japanese art. And in this particular case, we see a woodblock print produced in the centuries-old tradition. This print was produced by woodblock carvers and printers, and the publisher hired Kiyochika to come up with the design. So it was done much like the Edo period prints. But in this case, we see a photographic realism, which is pretty astonishing, actually. And for it to be a woodblock print, I just think it's amazing, really amazing. So I'm going to zoom in so you could see what I mean. If I get closer, you kind of see the lines from the block. And again, it still looks like an etching, but it is not an etching. It is, again, a woodblock print. And the title of this print is called, again, Three Geisha in One. It was done in 1878. And the theme of this print, it's actually interesting. There are three geishas, and we have, and they're identified. There is, and I should point out that each of the geisha comes from a very distinctive part of Japan, and they're important cities. So one comes from Kyoto, one comes from Osaka, and one comes from Tokyo. And the reason for that is there's this theme of the three capitals that comes up in Japanese art. And many people might not know that actually Edo period, or the Edo period, Edo, or the city of Tokyo, was in essence the capital of Japan. But before that, it was actually in Kyoto when the emperor ruled Japan. That is the old imperial capital. But also, Osaka was the site of the imperial palace for a short period of time. I think it was an imperial city, in the 7th and 8th century. So it was there for a bit. And so those three cities represent three capitals. And they're reflected in this story, or in this image, by three geisha. And the names of the geisha are the following. Kayo from Kyoto. Let me see what else. What were my notes say? Hitotsuri from Osaka, and Kokichi from Tokyo. So these are the geisha. They're from these capital cities, and they also relate to a literary theme. And we have snow, moon, and blossom. And the moon is depicted in the center. The blossom is depicted here, and there's a sort of abstracted snow. And so the theme of snow, moon, and blossoms or flower is a theme that we see in Japanese art in terms of paintings, in other prints. I'm thinking of Yoshitoshi's series of snow, moon, and flowers. But I mean, that is a theme that occurs over and over again. And so Kiyochika sort of exploits this theme by using the theme connected to the geisha. And the geisha reflect, they sort of clearly reflect the culture of the time, but connecting them to a larger historical context to the capitals. But it's also interesting because like I said, there's a modern twist to this, because the image in which they are rendered is so interesting. It is so visually arresting for its realism. And I'll point out basically the obvious. So we have a face of a geisha here, a face of a geisha there, and in the center face shares the eye from the geisha at the viewer's left, and the other eye from the viewer's right. And notice how each geisha does not look the same. They all have their distinct features. Their facial features are different. And yet the center geisha shares the eye of the two other geishas. I think that's an astounding, a really astonishing feat to be able to reproduce this artistically in woodblock form. So I think that's just fantastic. The other thing I want to point out is that there's this beautiful cartouche with a poem. It's a haiku, and for those who don't know what a haiku is, it's a traditional Japanese poem that is arranged in 5-7-5, or 5 syllables the first line, 7 syllables the second line, and 5 the third line. And I don't have the original Japanese to pronounce, but the translation is, "Oh, to see moon and snow together in the mountain of blossoms." And so that is the poem. And of course, the poem is reflecting the snow, moon, and flower motif that the geisha represent as well. So everything is tied together. The literary sort of allusions to the image, and the image relating back to the poem. So there's a lot going on in this print. And for those of you who want to see the verso, because woodblock prints do tell a story on the back, you could see the printing of on the back. You could kind of see how the bleed through came through the paper. And again, you see that astonishing effect, the printing of the faces, the realism, and you see that on the back, and it comes through quite nicely as well. And so you could see it is not a photograph, it is not a litho. If it was a litho, it would not bleed through the paper, the image like that. So this is certainly the telltale sign of a woodblock print. So I'm going to sort of quiet down a little bit. I'm going to just zoom in so you could see the print, so you can enjoy that. I just think this work is stunning. And the circular sort of cartouching where the image is presented in really a Western way. It reminds me of a cameo that a woman would wear as jewelry, which usually has the silhouette of a figure. And so this whole thing is presented in such a way that it's certainly East meets West. There's so many things about the Western influence that's present, but at the same time connecting to traditional Japanese aesthetics, poetry, and history. So there's a lot going on in this print, and I love prints like this because I can go on and on about them, and there's so much history embedded into the image. And so just to say a few more words about Kiyochika, he represented the Meiji period quite well because his prints are sort of imbued with this nostalgic sort of looking back at a period that he participated in his youth, but at the same time very much aware of present day Japan with all of the new things coming in, and certainly maybe the loss of innocence that the old Edo period may have had by the communication and by the importation of Western influences and things quickly changing in Japan. And when I say quickly, I mean quickly. There were certain parts of Japan, particularly the capital, Tokyo, was changing monthly. There were steel bridges being erected, new buildings, new architecture that was being imported. And so certainly the landscape was changing, and Kiyochika was acutely aware of it. And so his prints, when you look at them, particularly his landscapes, they have, as I said, a nostalgic kind of feeling, a yearning for what was once something that was part of Japan, and at the same time, sort of, he's embracing the change. And in this design, we see him embracing the realism of Meiji period Japan based on Western influences, and yet holding on to traditional printing techniques such as woodblock printmaking. So again, this is a fantastic design. In my opinion, it's a masterpiece of Meiji period printmaking, and one of those designs that you just want to come back to over and over and over again. Now, these two books are two of dozens. I could easily think of a half dozen Kiyochika books I could recommend. And despite the scholarship and despite the books that have been published on his amazing work, I still think, there is actually an image of the print in this book here. So I still think he's yet to receive his due. And perhaps that's more from the collecting community than from institutions. His work is certainly represented quite well in all of the major institutions that house prints. By the way, I'll point this out. These two prints are actually not woodblock prints, but they're etchings and copper plate prints. And so he he basically produced artwork in all kinds of mediums. And so he was certainly an artist of his time. But, and these are also, some of these are woodblocks, some of these are etchings, and they're politically charged cartoons. Some of the designs show the Emperor Meiji. Some of them are war triptychs. Some designs which basically are propaganda. But he was very active as an artist and produced all kind of artwork. And when I think about Edo period prints, I do think about how the artists often didn't have a strong say in their work, and it was mostly the publisher that was strongly suggesting what the artist should produce. But in this case, I think Kiyochika certainly produced work for publishers work that they wanted, but he was also an artist of Meiji period Japan and produced work that he was proud of, that he was certainly very much involved in. And no artist of the period would have produced this. This is quintessential Kiyochika. So I just wanted to point that out and share these great reference books with all of you, and just share this print, which is one of my favorites from this period. And before we go, I'll zoom in one last time. Well, thank you for joining me. I think that print was astonishing. I love that design, and so it was a pleasure to be able to share it with all of you. And this print is part of my current new exhibition online at collectingjapaneseprints.com. It's an exhibition of basically masterpieces from all genres. So works from the Edo period, a few beautiful hokusai works, some utamaro. A lot of things have sold, but there's still quite a few things available. There's some wonderful shinhanga and some sosaku hanga. So there's a little bit of everything. And Western artists working in Japan. So I encourage all of you to have a look, even if you're not in the market to buy a print. The images on my website are high quality. There's a lot of research that goes into the entries for each print, and so I encourage all of you to read what we've put together and just enjoy the exhibition, because it is fantastic. I'm really proud of that exhibition. And of course, as the summer days progress into fall, we are working hard on other exhibitions that will make it to our website in the fall and winter. So there's a lot to look forward to, but there's still a whole lot on the site right now. So thanks for joining me, and I look forward to welcoming you again on the next Woodblock Wednesday. Until then, see you soon. Bye.